This is Tim.
I'm Mulele.
And this is Critiquing Comics. Welcome to Critiquing Comics. This is Tim with Mulele in Tokyo. Happy New Year. You'll be hearing this in January. So the comic this time, it's called Yiffing in Hell. And I had a little trouble with that because it was written in this kind of weird font, and I was trying to figure out what that first word was.
Yeah.
And I had to look at it in his email in order to figure out, okay, it's a word that I don't know what it means. This was sent to us by Pablo Rincon, who also goes by the name Geladaa. And he was doing a Kickstarter for this, so I noticed that he canceled it a few days before it would have finished.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't going to get there. He wasn't going to get to his goal. But this is called Yiffing in Hell, Episode 1, Secret Reunion in Carfax Lodge. And the sort of blurb that he put in his email says, in the far distant future, an artificial wolf, a fugitive once revered as a hero across the stars, steals a world and bleeds it to fuel. An endless stream of illusions, a bridal gift for his high school sweetheart. Okay. And he sent us this PDF file, 272 pages. And what it is, I think the way that it's supposed to be printed, it's a little hard to figure it out in PDF form. But it seems that there are illustrations on each left side page and an explanation on each right side page, which is kind of like, it reminds me of dialogue cards in a silent movie.
Yeah, I was thinking of that too.
With the kind of ornate frames, although it's more text than you'd see in a dialogue card.
Yeah.
And the cards, each card has, it first mentions a piece of music, which I guess is his kind of theme for that illustration. And then some kind of explanation. I'm using that term loosely. Explanation of what's in the picture. And then each one generally ends with either the word hard or the word soft, and I had no idea what that was getting at.
Well, I took a look at his video in the...
I didn't get to that.
Yeah, the Kickstarter video is bizarre. He basically says, this is a book that I've worked on for 6 years, and it will... when you read it, you will realize at the end that it confounds you and you know less about it than when you started. And
that's always a recipe for disaster.
Well, I'm kind of wondering, what's the point of that? I mean, I should talk about the artwork just a little bit first. The artwork is absolutely gorgeous. He worked really, really hard on it. You can see a lot of influences from anime and video games. And a little bit of painting influence, although I'm not sure which artist he's being influenced by, because I'm not so much about contemporary painting. But as gorgeous as it is, these title cards, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, cryptic is putting it mildly sometimes.
Yeah, well, I should say English is not the native language of the writer.
Right, he lives in Mexico.
Yeah. And, you know, for the first couple of cards, I was like, okay, that's kind of cryptic, but it's also kind of okay, because I kind of see the kind of the raw writing of the artist, of the writer. But it seemed to have no point of reference. It seemed to connect to nothing. And even in between each illustrated page, it only loosely began to refer to it after maybe the first first couple. And even then, I don't know what I'm looking at or what's happening. And I didn't even realize that it was a sequential story until about the seventh or eighth page.
Yeah, I wasn't sure at first either, especially since, it begins with a couple of pictures of this pregnant hermaphrodite robot wolf standing in a field of flowers, and then suddenly it's a couple of thousand years earlier, and they're on the spaceship, and I figured, after I read it a couple of times, I figured out that apparently there's a cryogenically frozen crew on the ship. And Hobbs the rainbow snake is sneaking around the ship looking for the captain, finds the captain, and devours him. I got that much out of it.
Sorry. Am I to understand that you read this several times?
I didn't read the whole thing. I got about the first 50 pages.
Okay.
And I read that part a couple times because I was like, I read all this and I didn't get anything out of it. Let me try it again. Is it my brain that's not working, or is the problem inherent in the text? Let's see if I can get anything more out of it.
Well, this is I'm very conflicted about this because this is where I look at the artwork and I think, man, this is amazing. The man has skills, but every time a page of text came up, the words "fuck you" appeared in line. And because seriously, fuck you for nonsense. The title cards take up as much space as the illustrations, but the illustrations themselves, without the title cards, would actually work better. It would be much more interesting, because understanding what the soundtrack is for each piece of artwork is utterly pointless.
Especially if you don't know the piece of music.
Well, that, and who cares? The page itself is only going to be a moment in time for me, even though he obviously spent hours painting it. I can understand where he took 6 years for this.
Yeah.
But at the same time, why? What does he want to say? And if he just wants to confuse me, well, mission accomplished, but I'm not going to buy it.
Yes, exactly.
Looking at the Kickstarter, the man wanted about $6,000 US dollars for printing. Got about 16% of the way through and had to cancel. I don't necessarily think it should be published in this form, and I generally would not give that advice to anyone. I would say go ahead and publish it as it is. Learn from from what you're doing and get experience through that. But this person is quite accomplished as an artist and has a very strong idea of how he wants to publish this book. But conceptually, it's a bit of a mistake. And it's not necessarily the story, but the way that it's presented. And I think that he's going to wind up with several thousand copies of a book that he can't move.
Yeah, because if people pick it up and go, I don't know what the hell's going on, yeah, they're not going to buy it most likely, unless the art just really wins them over. But they're not going to, if they're not getting a story out of it that's intended.
Yeah, should also mention that this is part one.
Yes.
And so, to be honest, after reading is a loose term here, part one, I really, really don't want to see part two. And the reason for that is about 2/3 of the way through, there's this intense graphic sex scene between the wolf and his female
I missed this.
lover. It's very graphic, X-rated in fact, and then he very graphically eats her, like tears her apart and swallows her whole.
Okay.
Not whole, swallows her in pieces actually,
Yeah.
but completely devours her. And it conceptually is interesting, but it starts as a pornographic love scene, turns into a rape, and then a snuff film in very quick succession. And as you're going through this, it really fucks with your mind. But it's like you wandered into a Disney film, and then suddenly it's not. It's porn. And that's it's. I'm not saying that you absolutely have to have your Disney and your porn separate, but I'm just saying that there's a certain expectation at the beginning of the book when you present this beautiful, almost Wizard of Oz-esque picture at the beginning of the book, but porno at the back of the book. And it threw me, and it was not. Actually, he does spend a lot of time on that thing, that rape and kill bit.
Yeah, I'm looking at it here. It takes quite a few pages.
Yeah, and I don't know. It was gratuitous, I guess is the word, and I just felt that it wasn't really. There was no point to it. Once you establish that the wolf in fact kills his lover, I don't even know, kills his victim, and the idea that at first she was shocked, but then she was into it, and then she was kind of okay with being eaten. That's some weird fucking shit. I for me, it's just off. But hey, that's not my thing. But it does throw you hard about halfway through the book, or the tail end of the book.
Mm-hmm.
And I think is another misstep. He should at least be upfront about, hey, this is geared towards adults who are down for rape and snuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. There seems to be no moral compass for this. Mm-hmm. And if that's your thing, then that's cool. But for me, it just felt like, well, why? What am I looking at, and why am I looking at this? What is the benefit of this project? What does the artist want to say? Why is this here? And you want me to pay how much for it?
Yeah, and then I'm looking at the last part, and it looks like it's an anime, and they're girls going to school and playing a board game, and
yeah. So, I didn't read the title cards, but I did look through the artwork to the end, and getting to the end was not better than just looking at the first 50 pages. It got kind of hellish, and well, Yiffing in hell, okay, but I just looked at it and said, no, not for me, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. His Kickstarter was canceled, I think, not because the artwork is bad, but because in everything that he puts up about this, he is trying to play some sort of esoteric game with the reader. And,
like, ha ha ha, you won't understand it, and it'll draw you in because you don't understand it.
Well,
I mean, we've seen that a number of times in the past. It's a common mistake, I think.
But the thing of it is, with the ones that we've seen in the past, these were amateur writers or people who were kind of confused about what they were doing. They thought they knew, but in fact, you can see the ignorance in the work. This person is not ignorant. He is fucking with you on purpose. And I very much feel that. And so in a lot of ways, it makes me angry that he would do that. But at the same time, for people who are into that, it's a kind of nice game. But it is kind of a brutal work. And for me, there's no redeeming quality here outside of the artwork, and even that is kind of destroyed at the end with the snuff part. Mm. So, I mean, as a comic, don't want it, don't recommend it.
Yeah, I asked myself if it was actually a comic or not. I mean, there is a story, although it's a little hard to discern sometimes. But I mean, it's pictures and captions.
Yeah.
It's a form of comic, I guess.
It does have a sequential flow. If the it sometimes or usually full frame pictures, it does actually get into more of a comic feel towards the end. But I think the thing that I find most upsetting is that he is so competent as an illustrator. And he did work so hard, and you can see the hard work. But the thing that he made was so ugly in its concept. Don't want to see it in art form.
You mean the snuff part?
Well, the snuff part, but also the constant playing with the reader, just for the sake of playing. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's just rubbing me wrong. Maybe there is an audience for that who are really into how he plays and how he pushes the idea of music, or will actually sit down and take a couple of hours to read the book and actually pull up the soundtracks for each painting and really be into it. But for me, the point is, the question is why? What is the point of it?
Well, yeah, looking through, I guess I don't always understand what the picture has to do with the story, but sometimes I do. But still, it's like I don't really know kind of the stakes here. I don't really feel for any characters other than the woman who gets killed during sex. So, yeah, I don't really have something that's, pulling me to complete reading it.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess in summation, I would usually say good luck with your project, and I hope everything works out. But in this case, I would say rethink this bad boy, and maybe cut a couple of things, edit yourself. I don't really need to see your id on paper. I'd rather see something that you thought through and actually aimed for, thinking of the audience rather than just your own tee-hee-hee moments.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you'd like us to critique your work, send a PDF or a link to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read at least 30 pages, and we'll talk about it on this podcast.
I'm sorry, I should say reading is kind of loose at this point because, my fucking God, I couldn't read 30 pages of this, but I looked at the pictures. I'll look at least 30 pages of pictures. In this case, I looked at least 150, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. All right, so till next time, this is Tim.
I'm Mulele.
Thanks for listening to Critiquing Comics.